Hi there and welcome to this video tutorial. Today I'm going to use the reference at the top left and try and recreate something like that in my own style. As this is also going to be a weekly tutorial, I just will follow the steps that I usually do by going step by step for the written tutorial to make more sense. And for this I start off with a rectangular shape, which I then add a clipping mask on top and start to fill in my background colors first. I'm going in here with my hard shading brush and I'm starting with the sky colors. I'm choosing different blue hues here because the gradient at the background of the reference photo is kind of a gradient from a light turquoise to a light baby blue and then to a darker navy or royal blue. So I'm kind of trying to just add all the different blues that I can see, just testing out which blues kind of fit and which don't, and then I will be smudging them together later. As an alternative for the hard shading brush from my own pack, you can use any airbrush, to be honest. This is just a very gentle process for the sky colors. Once I feel like I've added all the colors of the background sky, I then go ahead and create a new layer which I tap onto and tap onto the clipping mask again to create another layer that belongs to the rectangular shape at the bottom. And here I will now start to add my watercolors, the very basic ones, with the, I've called it a hollow square brush, but it is also rectangular, also from my pack. Just this one is just a really nice clean shape, but of course you can use any brush that gives you that shape, like just a straight line as well. I'm choosing two tones here. One is more turquoise in the foreground and one is more baby blue in the background, because as you can see in the reference photo, there is more turquoise towards the foreground, but it doesn't really matter because I will be adding the big rock shapes in a minute, and then I will change the water according to those later on anyways. This is just for the orientation a little bit, and then of course you've got your little sandbank on the left bottom. In this part, I'm just combining all of these layers together so I can group them, duplicate them, and then just create the steps that I usually create for my weekly tutorials, as some of you might know. I then go ahead and flatten the first one so that just is a finished image for now. Then I go into the other group that I've got now, create a new layer that is also a clipping layer mask, and I will continue with the rock shapes, the very basic shapes now. For these rock formations, I go in with a medium color, as in the value, just like a middle tone, and then I can build it up later from that on with the shadows and the light. I'm using the defined coloring brush from my own set. Again, you know, the studio pen was my preferred option before I created my own brushes, so I would always recommend that one. Then I go ahead and erase parts that I find unfitting with the same brush in the erase option. So again, I'm using the defined coloring brush for the eraser. Later on, when I'm coloring in the actual rock formations and I'm rendering them out, I will also be changing the shape a little bit. And you know, as always, just as a disclaimer, I'm not trying to fully perfectly recreate that reference image because that would take me a hell of a lot longer if I could even do it. So yeah, I'm just gonna go and do some rock formations that are inspired by this. Once I've finished filling my shapes in, I will go ahead and duplicate that layer and then merge that one with the duplicate together, because with the define coloring brush, sometimes when I don't press hard enough, there will be spaces left over in between the coloring lines, so just duplicating that will make sure that it's nice and opaque. Now I've gone into the lower layer, that is the layer with the water surface and the beach foreground, and I'm just going to add a little bit of basic shading to the beach in the front. Just very basic, copying what the reference is doing, just giving it a medium dark shadow, and yeah. And then I'm gonna go ahead and start adding some more values to the actual rock formations. To do that, just a few seconds ago I de-clipping masked the rock layer, and I've added a new layer on as a clipping mask onto the rocks themselves. Just go back a couple of seconds if you didn't see that, and if you don't understand, or just send me a message. But essentially that is so that I can fill in the rock shapes without worrying about painting over the edges of the rock shapes. Like here, I'm trying to add that shadow that is at the bottom of the rocks, between the rocks and the water, and obviously if I didn't have a clipping mask I would just paint into the water and I would lose the shape that I'd already created of the rocks. And also I just wanted to say, with the values, I try to pinpoint where the darkest shadows are first, and then just go in with a medium dark and just kind of edge myself along until I figure out where I'm placing what. So I will go in with like medium dark colors to put like the basic darkest parts in, and then I'll go in with a darker color like I'm here now and just add that extra bit of shadow to it, and so on and so forth. Once I've added my medium colors, I will go ahead and add some light to it. So I'm choosing the lightest shade for now. Also continuing with the define coloring brush that I've been using, and just adding that to the parts where the light will hit the most. When I add that, I kind of look at the reference photo as well. And here, for example, I decided to add a second slightly darker shade next to it, so it transitions better to the darker shadow alongside that light part. While areas next to the light parts are often saturated, the shadowy parts are usually desaturated, so I go into the grey tones with this, and in this case on the right side there's a lot of desaturated shadow, so I kind of go in with the red greys because they also nearly look blue because they are closer to the blue on the hue color wheel spectrum. Of course that kind of then reflects the environmental colors and light, or what they would refer to as bounce light, I believe. I haven't studied art, so please don't nail me on the theories because I am not sure about the theoretical part of painting. I just like to paint. comes to shading, like here, I don't really know how to explain it, just because I don't know if there's any explanation necessary. I'm just kind of trying to move forward bit by bit through this part of the rock formation by looking at the reference image, looking at only shadow and light on this rock, and then just trying to copy it, I suppose, and remembering that where shadow is, it's usually saturated, and where light is saturated, and that's why I move along the color wheel the way I do. So the shadows will be more towards red and the bright parts will be more towards yellow, orange. By now the rock has taken a lot more shape, and in a minute I will add the darkest shadows that will give it that proper three-dimensional look, and then I'll be moving on to the next rock shape in the background. When I'm adding the dark shadows, I usually make sure that I'm not covering the entire shadow in dark, even though it might look completely dark. It usually isn't, and I feel like that is something that will give anything a lot more depth when it's not just black or really dark, but there is like another dark color in there that's slightly lighter. So like here, I've just gone back a step and I've decided to add the darkest part on the left of that crack instead of on the right, because I want to make sure that it looks like it's darker where that rock is kind of cut, where the light isn't shining into. Does that make sense? Anyways, I just kind of try to not cover everything up, I suppose. Okay, I'm gonna finish this rock formation off for a minute with the dark bits at the bottom where the shadow will be most, and then I'll move on to the other rock formation on the left in the distance. This time I begin by adding my light first on the background rock formation, continuing with the defined coloring brush. Generally speaking, I will be using less darker shadows for this one because it's further in the distance. As you can also see in the reference photo, in the background it just gets less and less contrasting, the colors, because it just kind of fades into the distance. So I'm going to be using maximum 3 shadow tones for this background one. Starting with this one, just a really nice and simple, close to the medium color that I chose as the base color for the rock formation, just going in and enhancing the shape in a way that will kind of define the rocket itself. Once again, this is on the clipping mask, so I will need to go into the rock formation base layer below that in order to change the actual shape of something. So here I'm going to be doing just that. I wanted to add a little bit more rock on the top there, so I went into the base and I just decided to erase a little bit there as well, and then I can just go back into the clipping mask layer and shade it there. But yeah, you do have to kind of go back and forth sometimes in order to change the shape, which can be a little bit annoying, but I do prefer the perk of not worrying about, you know, whether or not I'm painting over the rock edge and into the water. I'll now go ahead and just change a little bit more of the colors that I've already added by removing some of that bright color that I had as my highlight, and as you can see, that immediately changes the shape of the entire structure. I just wanted to try a few different things out, and there's not too much to do before we move on to the next step. Okay, and that's it already for this rock formation. Now I will go zoom out and check my layer, just seeing if I drew somewhere else that I didn't want to draw or something, but I like it, so I'm going to merge those layers together, and then I can go ahead, do the same thing as I did earlier, duplicate the groups, flatten one of them for my step, and then move the other group to the next part so I can continue there. In this part, I'll be focusing on adding more colors to the water and some color and clouds to the sky. I'm choosing my define coloring brush again, and then I just go ahead choosing a really bright turquoise green color. As you can see, the reference photo has that one intensely as well. Then I just go and add several turquoise tones to kind of get a gradient in there, making sure that I'm adding some darker ones as I go and move into the shadow of the rock formation on the right. Here the turquoise kind of merges with the navy blue or royal blue, I'm not entirely sure. So I'm just going to go and add some desaturated blue first and then go in with something a little bit stronger. I am kind of just trying myself out a little bit here, I guess, just kind of trying different things out and experimenting. I think there are several moments in this entire painting process that I go back on what I've done because I don't like it, and you know, that's kind of just normal. I don't know if that is standard for other creators because I haven't really watched any other tutorials to say or do but this entire process, by the way, is all real-time speed, and I haven't cut anything out on purpose anyways. There's one point when my camera decided to give up because of storage space once again, but I will explain everything that happens in detail. Anyways, back to painting. As you can see, the darkest shadows are just right under the rock formation, and I'm not too worried about making sure that looks that way right now because in 2 steps time we'll go to adding an overlay blending mode layer, and that is usually where I end up adding my shadows in. So this is just kind of adding the basic colors and making it look better. As you can see, I've painted over the side of the canvas that I'm painting on, that small rectangle, because it wasn't a clipping mask yet, so I've now changed that and now it's all neat and tidy again. Next I'm going to add some clouds. For this I go onto the background sky color layer, and with a define coloring brush I'm just going to start by adding the lighter color of the clouds before adding the shadow. This doesn't have to be pretty or anything because I will be smudging it out later. I'm just always starting rougher and then I will smooth it out after. This cloud shape was my first mistake, I think, or maybe my second, and because I'd not intentionally gone into the layer, I didn't realize I was not layer, and so I couldn't actually erase the cloud, so I decided to try and smudge it out first, but it just ended up looking really bad, so I decided to just press the undo button several times and go back to before I had added my clouds up on the left top. And now I decided to go in on a separate layer, just creating a new layer and then adding my clouds in order to prevent that mistake from happening again. This is actually the reason why I do use layers, is because then I can erase parts of an object without erasing parts of the rest of the painting. So yeah, in this case up there with the clouds, I color picked these from the reference image, and they were more of a reddish, brownish kind of hue color, so I went in and added that to the other clouds as well. And yeah, in a way it is very nice because it reflects the color of the rocks and the beach or whatever in the front. Composition wise, I think that is actually pretty cool. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more of a transition color here, just kind of going into the different hue of the sky, and then I will go ahead and smudge it all together in a minute. Before I smudge it together, actually, I decided to make a new step out of the smudging part, so that when I write out this tutorial, it makes sense how I've gotten to the smudged out version. So I went ahead and duplicated that group, merged together the other layers, flattened one group and moved the other group over to continue painting. And yeah, then we're gonna go and smudge things out. I'm using the define coloring brush again in the smudge tool in a second, and then just going forward bit by bit, starting with the background colors of the sky. I decided to merge those layers together just now because they're all just the sky background colors, not the actual clouds, so it's fine. I decided it wouldn't matter if I merged those together and then decided to smudge them out, so that is what I did, starting with those sky colors and using the hard shading brush actually first to smudge these things out, because this is the sky and not the clouds. It doesn't matter if they're more diffused, but with the clouds I'll want to use the define coloring brush because it's a sharper edge, and when smudging these things out, for me it makes more sense to put the washed out things into the background so they look like they've got more distance to them than the other clouds. So I go ahead and smudge it out with the define coloring brush, and here I'm just gonna add like wispy edges and stuff and use this brush by going in the direction of the clouds with my brush strokes. to go ahead and start smudging out the water surface as well, but I realized that I actually had intended to be part of a separate cluster, so I ended up de-clipping masking the layer beneath and then creating the water surface that is like the turquoise swirls and stuff as a clipping mask to the actual water. And now when I'm smudging it out, I'm not going over the edge of the horizon. With shadows and light reflections, I usually pull them down in vertical brush strokes and then go across them in horizontal ones to kind of show that the reflection is coming towards you and being broken by the surface reflections. Once I'm happy with the way I've smudged it all together, I go ahead and merge those layers, so now everything looks nice and neat again. I also go ahead and smudge out the bottom of the rock formation on the right and on the left, so that it kind of merges together with the water a little bit better. as an extra step in this part, I will go ahead and merge together the sky background with the actual canvas background to have less layers, and then I create a new layer at the very top and add some green bushes and grass like the type that you can see on the reference photo on the left. I'm kind of trying around to see which greens will suit, and once I've decided on the greens, I will check out other colors after as well and how that will look. But for now, I'm just going to go in with the Define coloring brush again and just placing, the hard shading brush, I believe, and just going in and adding some bushes and groupings of green. I'm choosing that brush because it will just give me the basis, and then I can go from that and detail it more with the hard details brush and the grainy details brush after. As you might be able to see here, I also am choosing different green hues as I move between shadow and light. So on the right side of the rock formation here, because there's more shadow, I've chosen more bluish tones. And then for this side, I'm going to go in with slightly more yellow greens, and then when I add highlights, I will go in with yellow greens, because that kind of just adds that extra dimension where the sunlight hits the green. Like I mentioned, I wasn't entirely sure about the green color, so I ended up just checking out different hues, saturations and brightness levels with the tool that you've got in Procreate up there, hue, saturation, brightness. So I changed a few things around, and when you tap on the screen you can go on preview and cancel or apply, and I definitely wanted to cancel because none of that looked remotely good, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to fix the appearance of it by giving it that three-dimensionality that I was talking about, including adding highlights and shadows. So yeah, I go ahead with a grainy detail brush, color picking the bush of grass or whatever green, and then choosing a slightly lighter one with a slightly lighter hue, or going the opposite way for shadows. The grainy detail brush is obviously also from my set, so if you're looking for an alternative, I would recommend you use one of the pencils. The great thing about the grainy detail brush for me was, when I made it, the idea that you can have a brush show through the background a little bit when you add your color, but not too much, so like an intermittent translucency to it, which is great when you're adding stuff like details that somewhat fade out and give you the texture, but aren't like the intense details that, you know, fall into your eye immediately when you look at something. So it's great for transitions and stuff, and that's why I then use the hard details brush for the lightest colors, or when I want to accentuate darkness for the darkest colors. Again, like with the rock color formations, I keep it really simple, the grass in the background, rock formation, and just add one extra tone that is slightly lighter and more yellow to the green, because it's just further away, there won't be too much difference there. Obviously, if I was spending more time on this painting and I wanted to really render it out, I might do it differently, but in this case I felt like that was enough. Alright, well, next I'm gonna go and add a little bit more color to the front part, so adding like a line of highlight along that where I'm now, and then a little bit more shadow where the actual shadow is as well. This is now kind of the final stage before I add my extra color and then lighting. So there are 2 more steps after this, and that is usually the way I go with my tutorials. I make sure that by this step, number 4, I've got all the basic details done. I've got all the, the painting could be completed without, it's not going to look as great as it does when it gets color and light on top, but like the basic details need to be there. And so I'm just gonna go and add, shadow where it needs to be, and like cracks in the rock and whatnot, different details like that. So the green and the rock and the water, they make all sense. I've got like the basic stuff there. as part of the final touches, I'm just going to add a little bit more shadows in that, but also reflections in the water of the rock. As you can see in the reference photo, there is some golden and earthy tones in the water that are the reflections from the rock, so I'm going to do that a little bit, but mainly I'll be doing that with the overlay layer that I'll do in the next step, so I'm not too worried about that right now. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and now make sure that this entire group gets duplicated, flatten the one that I've got there, and then move the other group down for the next step. Now this is where I realized that after 1 minute 40 my camera decided not to continue filming, even though I keep continuously checking when I'm painting whether or not my storage is full, and you get that little pop-up. Of course, when it did come, I didn't see it. And I think I must have spent about 10 minutes extra on it that hadn't been filmed. But for now, this is all still before that happened. And then I will explain what happened after. So I'm just creating a new layer on top. And I've set that to the overlay blending mode layer. Now going in with a soft big brush. So I'm using the hard shading brush, contrary to the name, and I'm going in and just adding some shadows first. So when I go into the color wheel, on the left hand side in the color wheel of the actual color, overlay mode layer will make you have a darker color that is less saturated that you put onto the painting. But if you go into the right hand side of the color wheel middle part, then you'll have really intensely saturated colors. So even when I'm in the middle part here, I hope that it will reflect kind of like the medium colors, but it is a lot more saturated than if I went into the left. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just add a bunch of earthy tones, a lot more orange and reds into the stone, especially where the light hits. In the main light, I'll make sure that that is really nice and dark. Not that dark though, but yeah, that will be orange. And then more on the right side, I'll get a desaturated colors like that now, and also I will make sure I'll get some blue on there too. Alright, this is where it cut out already, so this is how I'm going to explain it to you. I've duplicated what I've done and I've set it to a normal layer to show you where I put all the colors. So right now it looks really bad because it's not in overlay mode anymore. So I'm just going to show you where I've added the colors. These colors that I'm pointing out now are the colors that I've added with overlay layer mode. Essentially I added some turquoise, extra turquoise to the sky where the horizon meets the ocean, some extra navy blue at the top of the sky. I've added some golden tones to the actual rocks and some light baby tones in turquoise at the horizon line. Then yeah, the orange and red tones are kind of like in the middle. And then I've added a bunch of turquoise green to just beyond that rock formation. And now I'm going to remove all the lines I've just drawn to show you the colors. And you'll see how it looks with the overlay mode layer activated, because yeah, this was just to kind of demonstrate where I've put all the different colors. And now I'm going to delete that. Yeah, this is how the overlay mode layer looks. So yeah, I'm really sorry that I didn't film that one, but it's not too bad. You just go in with the hard shading brush and add those colors to the different places to get the vibrancy of the colors out more. Now I'm going to duplicate that again. I'm going to flatten both groups, and I'm going to move one of those images over. I'll flatten that because the layers themselves aren't important anymore. I'm not going to go into the background anymore trying to change anything. Now I'm simply going to add another layer on top after I've sharpened the image, and then I'm going to create an add layer out of that. When you go into the adjustments, as I just did, there is the option for sharpening, and I find that incredibly helpful because especially when you've been using a lot of smudging, it just gets all the texture back out a little bit better. Obviously, if you too much sharpen it, then you'll get a lot of what are they called, like grizzly bits across the painting, and it won't look nice anymore. But it's a really nice handy tip to just get all the texture out. So yeah, I'm just gonna go in my add layer, still using the hard shading brush, and I'm going to add where the basic light will hit the most. I'm choosing, orange light for the warm parts, and then more like bluish ones for where the horizon is at the brightest. And yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and put those light parts in and then smudge it out with texture brushes. When I smudge out, I begin with my own brush, the rake part, the rake one. Obviously you won't have that if you don't have my brush set, so I would advise you to, or I would recommend the stucco brush from Procreate. That has really nice texture too, and I usually use that, but I've kind of found a fondness for this brush again, so I'm using it a bit more, and I'm just erasing the excess parts a little bit, but not entirely, because sometimes it's quite nice when that shine goes over the actual object. But yeah, here you can see me using the textured rake on the background, where it just makes that texture into the sky as well, and it's really up to your preference if you want to do that, but in this case I really liked it, so I stuck with that there. And yeah, here I'm just smudging out the light that I added in the back there using the hard shading brush, and I'm going to do the same across the entire horizon. You might see that there are like parts where it looks a little bit muddy. That's because I haven't smudged it out fully yet, so I will be doing that now, cleaning it up, and then afterwards I'm going to add some more details and texture and trying out a few different other brushes from Procreate itself. On this add layer, I'm going to choose the light pen next from Procreate, one of my favorite brushes, as you may know, and I'm just going to add a bunch of sparkles, particularly to the parts where there is a lot of light. also will go ahead and choose a turquoise green color next, and then add some waves to the surface of the water. And just on the edges of that shape, I will smudge it out with the defined coloring brush in the smudge option. I continue with that light pen and add some cloud highlights. These I will also smudge out, but I just wanted to kind of accentuate parts of the cloud that are lighter. Now I choose the hard details brush in a minute after smudging the last bit out, and I will be adding some birds into the middle of the sky. If I had paid more attention to the composition of the reference photo, I would have realized that the rock formation on the right is actually a lot more in the middle and larger across the painting. That is why in my painting there is such a big space between the two. So yeah, I never really paid much attention to that. And also in the foreground, you might see on the rock there is not the same distribution of light, but yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm happy with it. I hope that you are having fun creating this. I'm just going to do one or two more things. So first I'm going to sharpen this image a little bit, just the layer of the ad I'm sharpening right now, because I've already sharpened the rest, and again, if you sharpen it too much it goes really funny and grainy. And then next I'm going to choose two different other brushes from Procreate. Before I do that, I'm going to create another new layer that I'm setting to add, so I don't spoil what I've just done, that I'm happy with, and I can still experiment and then just erase the layer or whatever if I don't like it. So I'm going in with the water brush from Procreate first, and I've just literally put it all over, and actually I like this so much. I don't know why, obviously it makes no sense, but I like this so much with the whole lighting across. So I've hidden that layer and I decided to create a new layer, also an add layer. And now I'm gonna use the same brush and be a bit more sensible with it. Namely, I'm going to add some water reflections to the actual ocean, and I'm going in and moving it with the selection tool up there on the right and choosing the distortion move option so that it kind of lies a bit flatter on the water surface. And I will do the same on the right side of the painting, but I'll do it in turquoise then. So I essentially went ahead and experimented around a little bit with these different brushes just to see what I could do with this one. I think this one was the wave brush, and obviously it follows like the direction of your brush stroke, so I tried to see how it would look if I added more clouds, but I didn't really like that, so I decided to get rid of it again. And then I just chose the glimmer brush in luminance and added some sparkles to the waves in the front right after this little experiment anyways. So this was literally all the painting process, and I hope it's not too long, but yeah, let me know what you think anyways. I really appreciate feedback of any sort. Just give me your honest feedback and I'll do my best to improve over the next few months. I want to get really into this, so yeah, do let me know. And if you're looking for weekly tutorials or anything,